Hey guys, PieGuyRulz here, and so many people have been asking lately, where's the fair use? And being a citizen of YouTube, I decided to do my good duty and try and find this fair use wherever it may be, and wouldn't you know it, it was actually in one of the last places you would have expected to look. See, the fair use was under the judge's wig this whole time. Alright, silliness aside, you've probably heard a lot of people talking about fair use over the past few years, but also more specifically in the past few weeks here. A lot of people have said a lot of things on this subject, and there's a ton of misinformation floating around, and after doing a little digging into the subject myself, I found a few interesting things about it that no one is really saying. So, where's the fair use? To answer that question, I have two sources that both pretty much say the same thing. There's copyright.gov, which is a department of the Library of Congress, so yeah, that's pretty legit. And then there's also YouTube's own copyright guidelines, which can be found currently in 2016, all the way at the bottom of YouTube. Do note, though, that I am not a lawyer, and this is just my interpretation of the written law as I am reading it. So according to copyright.gov, fair use is a legal doctrine that promotes freedom of expression by permitting the unlicensed use of copyright-protected works in certain circumstances. Section 107 of the Copyright Act provides the statutory framework for determining whether something is a fair use and identifies certain types of uses, such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research, as examples of activities that may qualify as fair use. Section 107 calls for consideration of the following four factors in evaluating a question of fair use. This includes 1. Purpose and character of the use, including whether it is commercial or not-for-profit, which basically means that courts are more likely to side with you if you are not making money off this venture. Although, if you are making money, that doesn't mean you're not eligible for fair use, and if you're not-for-profit, that doesn't mean you automatically get fair use. This is also where they consider things like transformative art. If you've changed like 80% of a picture, if you've just totally rearranged everything about it, at that point it has become transformative and pretty much an entirely new thing, so courts are more likely to consider that to be fair use because it's totally new and distinct from the original thing. 2. The nature of the copyrighted work, which basically means if you're taking something from a more factual place, you're more likely to be eligible for fair use because you're using it for the advancement of science or to demonstrate something scientific or something along those lines. And conversely, if you're taking from something that's fictional, something that was already creative and imaginative on its own, courts are less likely to view that as fair use. Thirdly, amount and sustainability of the portion used in relation to the copyrighted work as a whole, which basically means how much of the original source did you use in whatever you're trying to claim as fair use, and in what way. If you use a 5-second clip from Scrubs and you've cropped it and put a random filter over it, that's way more likely to be seen as fair use than if you use 10 minutes of a 20-minute television show in your work. And 4, effect of the use upon the potential market for or value of the copyrighted work. This basically means that if you, let's just say, make a SpongeBob parody video where SpongeBob is cursing like a sailor without the dolphin noises, and do it in such a way that it looks official, that could have a negative impact on people because people see that and think that the company behind the show actively sponsored that and made that, and it could hurt the image and future sales. I know that's a weird example, but the basic gist of it is, if you make something using copyrighted material, it's pretty bad if whatever you're making ends up harming the original thing in a major way. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean criticism, but it does mean if you, say, review a comic book and show every single page of the comic book, that it does degrade the value of the original book and might have a significant impact on sales. As if that weren't kind of vague and wishy-washy on its own, the last paragraph here is what really gets me. In addition to the above, other factors may also be considered by a court in weighing a fair use question depending on the circumstances. Courts evaluate fair use claims on a case-by-case basis, and the outcome of any given case depends on a fact-specific inquiry. This means that there is no formula to ensure a predetermined percentage or amount of a work or specific number of words, lines, pages, copies may be used without permission. What this basically means is that there is almost no way for anyone on YouTube to know if what they are doing is actually considered fair use. The only way that you can say 100% factually that you have fair use is if you went to court and got a judge to rule in favor of you against whatever original material you used and say that that is fair use. Now, we can follow the guidelines that have been outlined here as best as we can, but even if you follow all of these guidelines and do everything right, the court could still come up with some other reason to say it's not fair use. Fair use is not guaranteed. And anyone who says that they are definitely within fair use either hasn't looked into this stuff enough or is making a big assumption. This is what I think the problem is, and it has nothing to do with YouTube. YouTube is just following what the actual copyright and fair use laws say. And if you really want something to change here, then you're gonna want to change the law because YouTube isn't gonna go around that. Believe it or not, the reason why this is the way it is actually intended to protect creators. The reason why other considerations may be taken into account isn't supposed to be reasons that people will not be granted fair use. It's supposed to be because technology evolves and different mediums evolve and society evolves to the point where these laws might not be as applicable in the future, so they left it intentionally vague and intentionally on a case-by-case basis so judges can evaluate based upon what's currently going on in society. And before the internet, there weren't a ton of cases of people trying to incite fair use. Sure, you had the occasional television show or independent filmmaker, but those people could actually afford lawyers and afford to take it to court if need be. And if you're thinking, oh, well, PieGuy, it's not that expensive to go to court. Yes, it is. Especially if you were going to go up against a large entertainment industry. See, there's this totally legal and yet really horrible thing that a lot of big companies do, where if you show up with a court case that they think they will lose, they can stall you out and make you run out of money. Through their team of lawyers, they can have a bunch of paperwork and do a bunch of weird legal finagling to make the court processes drag on. And for just some random guy on YouTube, or even someone who does this for a living on YouTube, we don't have infinite funds to continuously pay for this stuff. So if anyone did try to take this to court, they do run the risk of an entertainment company basically running them into financial bankruptcy. Isn't America's justice system just wonderful? But one problem at a time here. My point in all this is that if you want fair use, you're going to have to take it to court and run the risk of the entertainment industry doing what they love to do in crushing small creators. And the only alternative is to try and get the laws changed. Try and get it so that we can have actual specifics of what does clearly fall into fair use and what does clearly not fall into fair use. And yeah, I know, this is a lot easier said than done. I personally have no idea how you would even start to change something like this. But I do know that complaining to YouTube isn't going to do anything if this law stays the way it is. Basically, if you want your fair use, you're going to have to do a little bit more than just spreading a hashtag around. And honestly, looking at these 4 factors, I have to question if some of my favorite movie, television, and video game critics that use footage would even fall into fair use. Seeing as most of them get paid to do it, feature quite a few clips from the source material, and although it's not proven, they could potentially have a major negative effect on the potential market value of the copyrighted work. Basically, the point of this video is just for me to tell you that this whole situation is incredibly complicated and messy. It's not a black and white issue of, oh, well, we have fair use. Why aren't people letting us do what is clearly fair use? Like a lot of creators are saying these days. And I totally get it. I have friends who use clips and do stuff like this, and it's their whole livelihoods. If a court were to tell them that what they're doing is illegal, it would be horrible for them and all their fans. I understand why they're trying to protect this stuff so badly, and I think that for the most part, most of these creators aren't actually harming anything and are transforming the art enough that they are morally right to do what they're doing. But whether it's morally right and not harming anyone, and whether it's in the law, are 2 entirely separate things. Before I go, let me just say one last thing, and that's that YouTube's content ID system is absolutely broken. Although it somewhat has to do with the confusing nature of fair use, honestly, YouTube's system is broken in general. I've heard stories of musicians who composed and performed their own music in a YouTube video and then had that claimed by some entirely random company out there that's doing this just to steal money off of creators. While what is and isn't fair use is a gray area, I can definitely agree that these companies and these people who are claiming things that are clearly not theirs in any way, shape, or form is absolutely deplorable and something YouTube really needs to fix. I understand there's a lot of YouTubers out there and there has to be an algorithm because there aren't enough people at Google to facilitate talking to all these YouTubers that have questions. I mean, to put it into perspective, there's over 5,000 YouTubers with over 400,000 subscribers. But even as a system run by automation and bots and all that, this could definitely be improved by a lot. Well, I hope you learned something here. I know that I certainly learned a bit while looking into this. If I got anything wrong here, please tell me in the comments, because this entire thing is very confusing and very hard to suss out. There are links to resources in the description. PieGuyRulz, out.